I want to start with the Michael Oher story, only in that, look, there's all kinds of little stories we can get to, right? Brock Purdy has thrown 10 camp interceptions. I don't know if we care about that, or the Trey Lance. Do they even want him in San Francisco? We could get to the abject disaster, which is the Eric Bieniemy relationship right now with the Washington Commanders. There's only one quasi holdout. It's Josh Jacobs, but you feel like he's going to show up right before the first week of the season and then play on that franchise tag because he doesn't really have any options. There's lots of little stories we could get to, but this is a story that Jay Stu, I thought you said it best, right? It crosses. There's so many different elements to it, right? But I think the overarching thing is, and this is kind of where we are as a society. Okay, so stick with me for a second. In my lifetime, there's 10 of these sorts of stories, right? Of guy from nothing. Jimmy Butler was once homeless, right? Now he's Jimmy Buckets. Kurt Warner was stocking shelves at a grocery store while playing in Europe and Arena League or whatever, and then becomes the NFL's MVP and a Hall of Fame quarterback. We by the way, we never do riches to riches. No one ever grew up with money. No one's ever like, man, I grew up, I had no issues, 3-car garage, and oh yeah, by the way, I made it. Everybody, it's rags to riches, but these top them all. In the changing someone's life through helping by helping from a family, there's so many elements to it, right? This is in Memphis, Tennessee. And you have white family, black athlete. You have kid comes from no means and mom with personal issues to a solid, stable family. That it literally became what we would call, again, this is child of the 80s, it's an afternoon special. Right, you guys remember what days were those on, guys, where you get home and there's an afternoon school special? And
they're all for sure. They were never on Fridays.
I felt like Wednesday. Was the after school special, right? And maybe now you say, well, it's a Lifetime movie. But this was a real movie because we were told it's a real story because it was a real book. And you take all the other elements to it, and to start the week, you felt like, oh my gosh, this family's taking advantage of this kid. Like, this is terrible. The entire story appeared to be fraudulent because, based upon one lawsuit, there are allegations that they fleeced him. They literally exploited his name, image, and likeness. Of course, now as the other side of the story comes out and other pieces come out, the most recent part, Dan, and I know you know this. I don't know if everybody else has been paying attention because this story, I don't know if I can't get enough of, but I just want to see it play out before I make some true determination into what and who I believe. The latest is that the Toohey family doesn't want to have the conservatorship anymore. And, of course, the lawyer came out with some stinging barbs going back 2 days ago. And Michael Lewis, who, of course, was the author and then helped write the movie, Michael Lewis has come out and said, look, this is a Hollywood thing, essentially saying it's a bad contract and Hollywood made $300 million and these people only made $300,000, which they split up evenly amongst everybody. I don't know. It's just a fascinating story. Yeah. Dan, you and I, we work together every day, but we haven't because you've been filling in for Covino and Rich, who've been filling in for Dan. Where are you on this whole thing?
Did a complete 180. If you would have talked to me on Monday, I would have been like, gosh, how dare they do this to Michael Oher?
Yeah.
How dare they do this? 24 hours later, I'm like, this is bogus. And the reason is because I just felt who had the most to gain in all of this. And then I found out that Michael Oher's got a book out or coming out or is out and had been making some of the media rounds with some of this. And then I thought, Doug, to myself, how in the world could this family have imagined that this story would be not only turned into a movie, but make the, $300 million that you said that it ended up making that would lead to Sandra Bullock winning an Oscar for? There is no possible way that family could have known that or have this be the plan for it to work out for them to then want to screw Michael Oher over and not give him any money.
Yeah, I just we do this all the time, though, right? And I'm not saying just you. I saw it in real time with so many people in the media. I don't know what becomes of the Brett Favre story, but remember there was a good week last year during football season where Brett Favre was the worst human being on earth. Now, I don't think that some of the ways in which he went about trying to raise money for the facilities at Southern Miss were perfect. But I also think that as more and more evidence comes out, it doesn't appear that there's any sort of way in which he thought, okay, they're going to use welfare money, right? Like, it's one thing to call somebody who's got a grant, who's sitting on cash and go like, hey, man, can you donate to my school? This will really help me out. This will really help us out. It's a whole other thing to say, like, could you use the money meant for welfare recipients in the poorest state in the union? Let's take food literally out of mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters' hands and put it into a volleyball facility, right? There's a difference there. And I get it, right? Like when salacious accusations come out, it's like cocaine to all of us in the media. We're like, oh my gosh, we gotta, but we do it all the time. And now when it comes out, I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I did think it was a little much. Now, here's where I knew there was something up for a long time is I think all of us on some level have had Michael Oher on back when he was a young, burgeoning, we thought would be star in the NFL, and because we knew the story. But I don't think he's ever spoken about it because every time I've ever had him on or asked to have him on, I've gotten the, hey, look, you can have him on. He's great. But you can't talk about he don't want to talk about the blind side. He want to talk about how he's raised. What were you saying, Chase? Go ahead.
There's one exception. Remember, when he wrote his first book, I think it was 2011, he did a media tour. And that was, I think it was called Against All Odds or something like that. Or maybe I'm confusing it with a Phil Collins song. But he did address a lot of this. He wanted to kind of set straight the record from his actual story to the story in the movie. I just don't think he went this hard at the family back then.
Well, there's obviously, is this one that we're coming back from, right? Like there's this one's that's going to be hard to rebuild any sort of relationship there. Right? Hey, listen, I know I accused you of stealing $15 million from me, but we're good now, right?
I'll tell you what. Yes, on the surface, it does sound like that. But if the family dynamic was the same in both ways, I think you'd be surprised at what could heal. As crazy as it sounds, like the accusations, if one of us did it to the other person, there would be no relationship, even though we work closely together. But if this is supposed to be the family unit and it works for both sides. Maybe the Tui family feels one way and Oher obviously feels the other way. But if that is still there, I think that there could be amending no matter how horrendous this.
It's interesting you point that out because I would agree with you. I do think that all relationships, when they're based, when you dig through all the gobbledygook, right, you go through, obviously you'd have to go through a lot of therapy. I still think there's probably a tremendous amount of love and, what happens is people stop talking. I'm like, again, I'm totally guessing from 30,000 feet here.
Sure.
But you're guessing that here's Michael Oher, who is on a trajectory to success to making $100 million. His NFL career didn't work out, right? And now he starts looking through things, and people have been saying, like, bro, you made how much from that movie? You made what? Excuse me? And, you get around people who continue to kind of stoke that fire, and you don't actually sit down and have conversations with it. It's no different than any sort of marriage breakdown or family breakdown. When you stop talking, you start making up the stories in your head, and you start taking snippets of what other people say to you, and you create a narrative of your own. And there is definitely a room for redemption, especially if it truly is kind of based upon love and appreciation for each other. We're not close to that point right now. Right? Because it's not like Michael Oher's like, yeah, hey, my bad.
Yeah, it's way off in the distance. And I also find it interesting, Doug, from what you said at the outset of the show, specifically with this show that we are currently sitting in for the guys for, the Dan Patrick Show. And what is the conversation about Rudy and what Joe Montana said about the movie Rudy? Nobody wants to believe it. Nobody wants to believe that this great blindside story didn't actually turn out like this or actually wasn't like this. And that's the part that's like, if we found out that in Hoosiers, Jimmy doesn't make the shot, if that, didn't happen and it was a fictional story, we'd be like, oh, that's kind of a letdown. But then we feel like, hey, this did happen. This happened at Milan High School in the 1950s. This actually happened. There's something that is tied to it. And so now to have this, I feel that there's a different emotional reaction because you want to believe it's true. I mean, how many years ago did Joe Montana try to shoot down the Rudy, script on this show, and the guys still talk about it? And I think that's a part of this as well, and why, for everything that you said at the outset of why it still affects us right now, is because the story was so good. I don't know if it's, too good to be true, but we don't want it to not be that story.
Is the Kurt Warner the only story that's too good to be true that really is? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that one's pretty amazing if you really kind of get down to it. Like, he goes from Arena League and then playing in Europe and really the third-string quarterback with the Rams.
The grocery store.
The grocery store thing.
Yes.
To the greatest show on turf. And then, oh, yeah, by the way, the other element to it was, he with the bad was a finger or a hand when he was in New York. They couldn't play him. Like, he went, this was my thing. Kurt's a friend, and he's an awesome, awesome dude. And by the way, like, I don't know how many people know this. He's got a gym at his house, and so he always has people over to play, like, 4-on-4. It's kind of like three-quarter court length. And you always want to be on Kurt's team because he does make every call and makes a lot of shots, but he's getting the calls. Anyway, but, like, his Hall of Fame resume was hard because he had, like, 4 years where he's arguably or inarguably the best quarterback in the league. But he had, like, 5 years where he couldn't really play. Like, he was bad. And he was a backup. Like, within the context of that's not even taking into account how he made the league, etc. But the thing about Kurt is, like, he made it from nowhere, then lost it, then was a backup, then made it again in Arizona. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. And it's one of those, like, there's no way. It's too good to be true. And it's not. But the Oher story does appear to be, at least on some level, too good to be true. I just wish we could kind of, like, you guys ever seen Mystery Science Theater 3000?
Long time ago, but yes. Okay,
so Mystery Science, Jay Stu, you didn't say anything, so you've never seen it?
No, I remember it. It's kind of, and then Cheap Seats came after it, kind of ripped it off.
Right. And it's basically, you had, the idea was this guy and a robot, and was there like a dog or something? Can't remember. But they're stuck in space, and so they have to watch these terrible B movies because it's the only thing that they have. And they just make smart-ass comments the entire time. Right? I just wish we had, like, Michael Oher while that movie's being played and say, like, well, here's what really happened. Yeah, that's not really how it took place. I don't know. That may be a bummer too. So I'm not sure. Okay, so Dan's done a 180. Where are you, Jay Stu, on this story? Who do you believe as of Thursday, August 17th?
It sure doesn't look good for Michael Oher's side of the story. And I think when the receipts come out, I think the family's probably going to come out looking like they didn't do a whole lot wrong here. I think it's sad, though. Rich Ornberger was in for you earlier in the week, and he had said something along the lines of, this is sad regardless, because if this is a pure money play, that means Michael probably went through all of his money, which is sad, because you can't spend that money. That means you got bad advice, financial advice, and he wouldn't be the first nor the last. But the whole thing just stinks. I think I was at that phase on Monday, and I'm still at that phase. But yeah, that's kind of where it's at. It seems to be leaning towards the family, but I think we'll reserve all final opinions.
John Ramos, how about you?
I just think I agree with Jason. I just think it's sad. It's sad that something that was so powerful, winning Sandra Bullock an Oscar and just kind of being a good feel-good story has come to this level right now.
Is it sad or is it too bad? Because there are levels.
Yeah.
Right? Like That's too bad. But if you
I'll go with sad, but you can go with too bad.
I'm gonna go with that's too bad.
You're gonna go. That's too bad.
Yeah.
Not sad.
Yeah.
I really
think
thought
sad.
Dan was doing the lyrics of an '80s pop band or something.
No,
I really
but I
did.
did
Yeah.
want to say, remember when Michael Oher sat down and said, "Take a look at me now," after you made your "Against All Odds" reference?
Ah, nice.
Oh.